Let's bring in Rami Khouri. He's a senior fellow and a professor who's followed what's going on across the Middle East. The wider question, of course, to do with Israel and the Palestinian territories, the occupied territories, the country of Palestine. Rami Khouri, what's your reading of what we're seeing right now in occupied East Jerusalem?
What you're seeing right now is the logical culmination of a 100-year battle between Arabism and Zionism. The creation of the State of Israel is a process that is heroic for the Jewish and Israeli people, but a calamity for the Palestinian people, because the State of Israel was created on Palestinian land, and the aim of Israel is a Jewish state. Zionism is a state for the Jewish people, and recently the Netanyahu government has been demanding that people recognize Israel as a Jewish state, not as a state of all its citizens. This is the logical culmination of that 100-year confrontation, where the land, the religious symbolism of the religious institutions there for the Muslims and for Jews and for Christians in other parts of the neighborhoods nearby. These are long-standing indigenous symbols, not only of religious piety, but of nationalistic solidarity, identity, belonging to the land, and everything else you can think of that makes a human being a human being. And you have this clash now going on in this one little area on what the Jews call the Temple Mount, what we call the Holy Sanctuary, the Haram Sharif. This is really as symbolic as it gets, where religious space, religious institutions have become political symbols. And for the Israelis, they're symbols of domination and Jewish supremacy in this area. For the Palestinians, they're symbols of resistance, solidarity, identity, and our long-term belonging in this land. The obvious answer to this is to share the land in two states, an Israeli state and a Palestinian state, with the holy sites open to everybody. That's the Palestinian proposal that's been on the table, and pretty much the international consensus. The Israelis are saying, this is Jewish, we control it, we set the rules. The Palestinians can be guest workers, day workers, laborers, tourists, but they don't have sovereign rights. Only the Israeli Jewish Zionist people have sovereign rights. And therefore, what you see in front of you is the logical conclusion of this struggle. And it's been now really concentrated not just on Jerusalem, but on this holy area in Jerusalem, where Palestinians in their tens of thousands will come and protect it, as they did last year in the summer when we had a similar situation. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians came and prayed in the streets, and they may do so again now. And keep in mind also that it was in September of 2000, I think, that Ariel Sharon went up to this same esplanade in this area with a couple of hundred Israeli policemen, and that sparked the Second Intifada, which was one of the greatest confrontations in modern times between Palestinian Arab nationalism and Jewish Zionism. So we should not be surprised that this is going on. What is surprising is that there is not a serious political process to resolve this in a way that is fair to both people.
Okay, I mean, clearly the dynamic for the Israelis and specifically for Mr. Netanyahu is the election. And I know that you have a very clear idea yourself on the election as it will be. It will become the right wing taking on the further right wing. So that's the dynamic for you, for the Israelis. What's the dynamic for the Palestinians? Because when you talk about the manifestation of the symbolism, what we're seeing here, it seems to me it's politics manifesting itself under the cover of or through the vessel of religion, because we've got the Hajj going on just now in Mecca. We've got 2 million people there who do not want to mix religion and politics. The reality is what's going on right now in occupied East Jerusalem is a heady mix, a potentially combustible mix of politics and religion. And whether they like it or not, those two things are very much mixed together right now in real time, this hour, in occupied East Jerusalem.
They are, and they're universal. You know, the American civil rights movement was really fought in the black churches of the South. The African liberation struggle and apartheid was heavily anchored in the churches of South Africa. Religion and politics are two sides of a similar human dynamic, which tells us that there is a deity that loves us, that promises justice, a normal, decent life of dignity for everybody on equal terms. When that is not given to people because of oppression, as happened with American blacks, South African blacks, or Palestinians today under Israel, when you don't have political and civil and economic rights, you cannot live a normal human life. Religion is your last resort, and therefore it's natural to see this kind of combination of religion with politics when the normal civic life of a country doesn't work. The point of the Palestinian side, as you asked, is what this represents is the pretty total incompetence of the Palestinian political leadership. Unfortunately, it's a very sad situation, but the PLO, the Palestinian Authority under Abu Mazen, is totally absent. They're watching this on TV for the most part, which is a terrible, terrible situation. And we've seen this in the last couple of years, especially since the Trump administration came into power, this squeezing the Palestinians, denying them aid, denying them construction, taking more settlements, expelling more people, putting the squeeze on the Palestinians so they ultimately surrender, and they won't surrender. Like the Jewish didn't surrender when they were driven out after the destruction of the first temple in the 6th century BC, and they ultimately came back and created their Jewish state. The Palestinians will not surrender. They will keep struggling for a fair and equitable solution that gives Israelis and Palestinians equal rights in adjacent states. That's the ideal, of course, and we keep struggling for that. And Jerusalem and the Aqsa in particular has now become the sort of the last stand of the Palestinians. This is where thousands and thousands of Palestinians will converge to pray, and they will converge there to show their solidarity, to protect their holy sites. Their leadership is totally missing. The leadership of the Palestinians in Jerusalem has now been taken over by the Islamic Waqf institutions and civil society groups that work together, including Muslim and Christian groups in Jerusalem and Palestine that work together regularly. So this is a real difficult moment for Palestine to have this kind of pressure by Israel, supported by the American government, with the rest of the world just sitting here watching it on TV. So they're going to take care of themselves, and they're going to try to do it in any possible way, preferably peacefully. But we're going to see these struggles continue until there is a political resolution that's fair to both sides.
Okay, Rami Khouri, many thanks.